Welcome to the Impact Room, brought to you by Douglas Jackson, who help you hire more impactful, diverse leaders who stay for longer and are more successful. The Impact Room is a business, CX and leadership podcast where exceptional, diverse and impactful leadership and wisdom is shared. We dive deep into pressing topics that impact your customer-led business, featuring interviews with CEOs, COOs, Chief Customer, Chief People Officers, directors, influential leaders and subject matter experts who share their lived experiences, top tips, thoughts, advice and industry trends to help elevate existing and future talent. So let's dive into our next episode, and please don't forget to like, subscribe or share if you enjoy this content. Thank you. Hello there, I'm Michelle Ansell, Managing Partner at Douglas Jackson, and today I am joined by Douglas Silverstone, Director of Technology at Southern Housing, who's also previously been a Chief Data Officer at Money and Pension Services and a Director of Data Analytics and Information Security. Douglas is passionate about helping organisations utilise smart technology to empower people and drive delivery, and he's also a trustee for AbilityNet, which are a digital inclusion charity supporting disabled people to access technology. He's also committed to driving better diversity of thought and opportunities across the STEM community, which we'll look forward to getting into more here. Douglas, hello, how are you?
Good afternoon, nice to speak to you. Love to be here.
Yeah, lovely to have you here. I'm looking forward to getting into this. So let's kick off. So we recently spoke and you said something really interesting around STEM careers and how this may be an opportunity to affect change when we're looking at the gender pay gap. Would you mind telling us a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so I mean, I think everyone's aware technology is predominantly male orientated, and it's just predominantly male orientated. And the more you look at it, the numbers aren't right. And I've been in technology for longer than I can imagine. And when I went to university, in a course of 20, there were maybe 3 women on that course. What I'm thinking is now I'm looking at the gender pay gap. And I work for a very social sector organisation, a housing association.
Yeah.
So we have predominantly the higher salaried jobs are technology or housing development sectors.
Yeah.
And they also tend to be the ones that are predominantly male. Whereas the opportunity comes from, if you look at the operational side of the business, the ones that are really passion driven, they tend to be mostly female orientated professions. So the gender pay gap is more complex. It's not role for role gender pay gap. It's cross function that it becomes. But I think that really gives us an opportunity, because the technology bit nowadays is actually the easier bit to walk into. The bit that's really difficult making technology work is making technology work for the business. So the opportunity comes from, if I can bring people in from the operations part of the business, if I can bring people in with business skills that there naturally, I've got a pool of people that are really talented, really passionate about our mission, that can then be brought into tech roles. There's a pathway there, and that pathway will naturally balance that out, because it's like when you've got pressure siphon effect. If you're taking some of this, you're going to improve the proportion over time. So that's one thing I'm really keen on. And then apprenticeships as well, I think, provide a real opportunity, because you get in early and you teach the skills you need. So generally, I think they're where we are.
Excellent. And I mean, on the apprenticeships front, and I was talking to someone else in the social sector about how they'd revolutionised or really changed where they went to for apprentices. Is that something you yourself have seen or done something as well to sort of perhaps help attract a more diverse pool, just on that subject, Douglas?
I've had a lot of success with apprenticeships. It hasn't. The gender gap hasn't really addressed that too much. Where socioeconomic approach it has, we're able to reach people that we wouldn't. And for a housing association, if we're going to be representative of the people in our communities, that's something that's really important. And apprenticeships get us people that would not have thought they could have gone to a university career to get that into that role, but they've gone on to really drive. And I'm thinking of a particular apprentice in a company I used to be at. They could have gone to university. They had the grades to go to university, but instead they did a cybersecurity apprenticeship. And And now I think years on, they're probably in a far better position than they would have been had they gone to university.
Yeah.
But potentially they wouldn't have done that anyway if it wasn't for the apprenticeship. So I think there's some real strength there. I think there's loads of other things you can do when you're talking about recruitment that help you reach people. So I really don't like interviewing, for example. I think interviewing for really technical skilled jobs, I'm putting people on camera right in front of me, high pressure, asking them questions. And it's just skills that for engineers, they don't need. They don't need to be able to talk to me and tell me the ins and outs of the problem. They just need to be able to fix it. But I haven't found a way of eliminating the interview entirely. So we'd give interview questions in advance. I try and make them as nice to talk to as possible. And that's the way around it. And then adverts, and I'm sure I'm going off on a tangent, but there are loads of things. Adverts, where you position them, the language you use, all of those sorts of things.
They're all interesting points, and I know you talked on another podcast about this, giving the interview questions in advance, and it's something that we put together when we did a sort of short video on diversity and inclusion last year for International Women's Day, and it was one of the things we said about increasing diverse talent in your organisation is giving people the benefit of the questions in advance, and I know you talked to that point as well. So I mean, going back to the point about sort of, bringing people internally, I suppose, in your organisation, because I think if I just go back a little bit, I think most organisations, when they look at entry level, generally have quite a good mix of talent, whether it's sort of representative fully of our demographic society is another matter, but they do tend to have quite balance in terms of gender. They tend to be able to attract people from other underrepresented groups, not always, but generally. But as we know, there's a massive drop off as these people go through the organisation. And I love the point that you make about, where's the opportunity to affect obviously the gender pay gap by bringing them into these more highly skilled and valued positions, but also I think there's an opportunity there regardless of how we develop and nurture and continue to retain talent when we've attracted it and don't lose it in that middle ground. Do you sort of have any other sort of thoughts on that before we move off on that, Douglas?
When we were talking before that, we talked about that, didn't we? And it did come up that there is this thing that, like I say, when I recruit entry-level roles, that we do get a fairly good mix, actually, and higher than average for women in technology. And then I look further on in the path, and it does shrink down again. And across the board, we are better than average, but better than average isn't enough, right? There's the point. But even so, it does taper down as you get more and more senior, and that gap appears to grow. And I've tried returnships, I've tried other things, and haven't cracked it. But I don't think we have to limit it to just you start your career here, and if you're a man or woman, then you build up skills and you recruit from the same pool. There are the amount of in technology, the amount of dependency on technology is a fundamental business skill. So there are roles that you can do, quite senior roles in technology, about how you're going to implement new technology, about how you're going to provide support to the business, about how you're going to manage contracts. All of those require you to have an understanding of technology, but they don't require you to know the detailed technical engineering part of it. So there's pathways, is my point, at every level that you can bring people in. If you're one with a successful career in this case as a housing officer or as a property developer or a call center operative, and you've gone on and managed a call center, all of those have skills that help manage a modern technology estate. In fact, with AI and with everything else that's going on, the technology skill itself of actually hard coding it becomes less and less something that a front end company like a housing association needs. We're still going to need them. Don't want to scare my team or anything like that. But actually, it's how we use them that's the most important bit.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And again, you just make me think about that ChatGPT and AI piece, and how much I think organisations, if we can lean into this and encourage so much of our workforce perhaps to experiment and become better versed with this technology and these tools, so that they can be supported in perhaps this technical skill or element that maybe would take us naturally longer to learn as an individual. It can give us this sort of wealth of knowledge and expertise at our fingertips, can't it? Whereas we then bring the human element. So, I mean, is that something you encourage your teams to sort of experiment with? Because this is an interesting subject that I'm talking to a lot of businesses about at the moment, and how much they're allowing their teams to experiment and delve into this world of, you know, emerging AI and technology and tools. What do you think to that?
Yeah, I mean, I think if anyone in technology honestly says they're embracing it fully, I think they're probably lying. It's because it scares me, it scares everyone, because it's moving so fast.
Yeah.
So every time you move forward, the world has changed again. So you need to keep moving forward, and you need to keep on it and on it. But I think there is a real opportunity there. But I think it's about how it's the same as it's been 10 years ago with mobile phones and years before that with other technologies. It's how people are able to use them to exploit AI, which is the important thing. When I got really despondent with ChatGPT when it first came out, and all of you go onto LinkedIn at that time, everyone was talking about AI use cases and everything like that. And they were all about how you drive more profit, how you drive more people into your funnel, how you create a piece of content that you've never given any thought to that attracts people in to talk to. None of those really changed the world. None of them really actually made a difference in reality. They make profitable, they make productivity. But through work with AbilityNet, I have seen some AI use cases that actually do start to change the dial and make people's lives easier and work things through. And that's quite exciting to me. And training and understanding is something that they're really good at, because they're people driven. So it's like, I want to learn how to code in Python. It does the basic stuff for you. And then it's like, well, how am I going to solve this problem? Which is the real key of anyone in technology.
Yeah, for sure. Interesting. Okay, so if we look at, you know, the housing association sector, and I speak to a large number of them, they often worry about their ability to attract top talent, especially if they're considering talent outside of the sector. What are your thoughts, and how do you think the sector can stand out?
I think it's a great place to work. I think there's a really good. So I've worked in charities. I've worked for Deutsche Bank. I've worked for charities. I've worked for government, and so I've worked across a broad portion. I found government really quite hard, quite bureaucratic. It's hard to get things through. I found banking and it wasn't about Deutsche Bank. It's just a massive organisation with no, I say something quite bad, with no real purpose. It's not that making money isn't the purpose, but it was just, we're just going to continue to turn the wheel kind of thing. Whereas housing, for me, has a really good balance of reward, of social purpose, of just the right amount of governance, where you're actually helping people, you're actually able to make a change, you're actually able to make a difference, and you're getting paid for it. So for me, it's a really good space to be in. And I think housing associations can make more of that, especially in these roles that aren't, if you're a housing officer, you're right on the front line. In technology, it's easy to miss that. But I try and talk to my team, I try and talk to them about, actually we make a real difference, because the more we do, the more people we're going to help, the quicker repairs happen. All of that is driven by technology. So we make a real difference. If you look at the TV and the news articles at the moment, Arab's Law, post-Grenfell, disrepair cases, mold and damp and mold, building 1.5 million homes, all of that is stuff that housing associations are grappling with, trying to do better at. And all of that can only be achieved if we get technologists as part of that solution. So that's fundamentally to it. And I look at, so when we talk about how we attract, I think that's the language we speak. It's not just a job, it's something that makes a difference. And if I look at my team, I look at other teams in housing, there is this thing where you either get people that have grown up through housing, they found their way in housing and they've stayed in housing and they've grown up and they've continued in that sector. Or there's another tranche of people we recruit from, and they're people that have had really successful careers in the private sector, and have frankly decided that they've done enough of that and they want that social purpose is now more important to them. and that's where we bring people in.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I think a lot of the challenge is, I think the sector, when internally, because of the challenges that you've talked to, and obviously the regulation, some of the recent issues the sector's had, I think that's very clear and prominent internally when people think of housing that work in it, and they don't necessarily see externally the values, as you say, the social purpose and those interesting things that people are really attracted to, and those elements. And I know myself, when I speak to so many, because we do obviously leadership, that social purpose is really key and critical in so many of people once they get to a certain level. I think it's somewhere where they can really, the sector can really tap into that talent. And at the lower level, as you've said, I think there's a real challenge to allow or enable people to learn more about housing associations as an organisation, because unless they've actually been involved with it because they live in one, a lot of young people may not even know what housing associations are, or the sector even exists in that early, let alone the careers available to them in that space. So I think there's more opportunity for the sector there to educate, the masses, I think, and to attract more of them, because certainly when we hear, values, purpose, mission, etc., these are more and more important, especially to our younger people.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly agree, and we are all, because we've got properties in every community basically.
Yeah,
so
yeah.
we have a link on the ground as a sector pretty much everywhere. You're probably never more than a mile away from a social housing property. Yet it is this kind of hidden sector that most people don't think about. So I totally agree. And we probably don't do enough of it. There's a housing association, Platform Housing, and they're just launching a digital futures academy, and that's partly of that. They're trying to really show what a career in housing is about, and that's really interesting. I'm trying to keep a close eye on, and hopefully we'll steal some of their knowledge once they've got it off the ground.
I'm sure. Okay, so I mean, throughout your career in senior technical roles, you've worked across, as we said, data analytics, information security, and you've mentioned in the past that while you've got strong technical expertise, now there are people who have, bigger value in your teams. They're more technically expert than you are. So if we look at the I suppose the leadership culture and management, and the gap, I suppose, when it comes to STEM and technically brilliant individuals, but how we transition them into great leaders, how can we better support those who are maybe highly technical in developing those strong leadership capabilities, Douglas?
I think it kind of depends how you define leadership. And it comes into the reward section, part of it, and about pay and reward. There are so many people in technology that are really great technologists, and they don't have an interest in managing people. So they start off being a developer, and because they're a really good developer, they become a senior developer, and people start asking them questions. How do I develop this? How do I develop that? That's leadership. But then what happens is they gather more and more people into their guild in their field, and then they're not doing the developing anymore. They're just leading, and they're just managing rather than leading, I should say. And they then have lost their passion, because it's not what they wanted to do. They've just found themselves managing, and they've got paid better for it because they kind of dragged them into there. So I think we have to value technical leadership as a discipline separate to management. And I think we have to find ways to empower those individuals to get the reward they're justified, but to lead in that way. And I can think of so many people with technical skills that are leaders in our organization, that you could probably go to any part of the organization and say, I've got this problem with this bit of infrastructure. And you wouldn't have to go far before they took you all to the same person. And that's leadership, right? That's because the organization knows no matter what the processes are, eventually it's going to get to that person's desk, and they're going to be able to work out how to fix it. But you have to protect those people, and you have to empower them to do what they need to do. So I think where that breaks down is there's kind of a ceiling in that, because if you're talking about leadership of C-level or exec director, the skills become different. The skills to solve highly technical engineering problems, you don't need an exec level. You need the ability to understand those problems. You need to be able to understand how long it takes and why it's complex, other than just a one line on a page that you're seeing. You need to be able to read that one line on a page and realize that's a month's worth of work for a whole team of people. So you need the background, but you've got to, so it's the interpretation of it that becomes important. And if you go too far down that technical line, it's very hard to get across there. But then, does everyone need to be C-level? Does everyone need to be exec director? So it's kind of, where's the value that you as an individual want to lead from?
It's interesting. And I mean, I know we've talked about neurodiversity as well. And if you don't mind sort of just talking about this just a little, because it seems to me, and I've got no data to back this up, but generally the STEM sector, you know, may well be more aligned with people, you know, from a neurodiverse background. I think sometimes that diversity of thought, or the different way they think, sits very well with those disciplines. You know, they seem to come at problems very differently, and can be a little bit more creative and sort of more comfortable sometimes in those environments, whereas those skills may not always mean they're comfortable in, you know, people. With people and leading people, perhaps, in that respect. Do you think? I mean, do you see that as a relevant observation, or not? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So interestingly, me and a colleague ran a neurodiversity workshop at the Housing Technology Conference a few weeks ago.
Right. Yeah.
And there was about 30, maybe a few more people in a room. And the general consensus across housing technologists was that not just that there was higher levels of neurodiversity in technology, but that you couldn't actually run a technology team without neurodiversity. Right. That it was something that the skills that neurodiversity brings are so fundamental to the way a technology team works that it wouldn't work without them. And I think that's probably true. And it's a lot of it is there's the attention to detail, there's the creativity side of it, and there's lots of different neurodiversity conditions, which probably have a whole podcast to our own right on it. But my point is, those skills are the ones you need to make it work. And when you talk around the conversation we're just having about technical leadership, there are some people with neurodiversity, and it's the neurodiversity, the way they think, that means they don't want to be a director, but they're really great technical leaders. So it's a different style of leadership. It's the same thing, it's a different style of neurodiversity. And one thing I believe, you've got to give freedom to your teams to be the best version of themselves. So if that comes through, you get a much better technology team, you get a much more cohesive team, because people understand they can work differently, they can think differently. If you put too much constraint on it, you lose the very creativity you need to solve problems.
Yeah, I mean, it strikes me, I think there's so much internally that businesses could be doing to sort of, you know, readdress, I suppose, the balance in roles, in individuals, and sort of career paths, in opportunities. I mean, we seem to be so traditional and so slow at moving the goalposts, if you like, and the thinking behind what we've done for generations. I think there's a lot of opportunity in organisations, perhaps, to get better from people and get people to sort of retain for longer with other opportunities. But we need to sort of start thinking about things very differently. I'm not sure we do that as well as we could already.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, that's like, we talk about flexibility, flexible working, and pre-pandemic, so I mentioned the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, there was a move to work from home, there was a move to work flexibility, and then that change that brought, everyone did suddenly. And we spent a lot of effort culturally helping people work from home. We sent chocolate cookies, we sent equipment everywhere, whatever people needed. We paid for desks at home, all these sorts of things companies did. And then the traditionalists kind of came back and was saying, well, we need to come back into the office. But we didn't do any cultural change to get them back into the office. And the culture changed, so you can't just create it. And there is that, and that the nature of office-based work for me is entirely different. It's about having a space to connect rather than to deliver work.
Yeah.
And the reason I say this in this context is I think that has changed. And when you look at working 9 to 5, to me, it doesn't matter if my team work at midnight. It doesn't matter if my team choose to work Saturday or Sunday. What is important is they've got the right work-life balance for them, that they're not working excessive hours. So if I try and monitor their time and their delivery by saying, oh, they were in 9 to 5, but actually their brain works in such a way that their brain is really awake from 3 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the morning. That's when I want to get the best of their value, right? That's the time. So why would I say they can't work before then if that's when they want to do? Now, I'm not saying to anyone in my team who's listening, they should be working at 3 o'clock in the morning, but that's my point. And different brains, different people work in different ways. The flip side of that, it's really difficult to manage because, like I say, everybody's brain works differently. Every neurodiverse condition is right. Some people really need a lot of structure to be told, this is how to work, now solve this problem, and very little. Some people need, there's a big problem over there, can you go and investigate it and solve it, come back in 6 months' time? So how do you lead a team with that diverse structure and all the old management books of saying, this is how to manage a team, this is the structure you put in place? It just doesn't matter for me. And so, it's a new discipline. I think it puts a lot of pressure on leaders and managers because it's them now that has to take the weight of delivery. And that's coming back to what was some of the stuff we're talking about. It's a very different skill.
Yeah, definitely. So if I was watching this right now and I had aspirations of being a future CTO or CDO, and I was maybe from an underrepresented group, I mean, have you got some top tips that you'd give me, Douglas?
Yeah, I was thinking about this, and because I've always been ambitious. I've always wanted to do it, and I kind of had conversations with leaders all the way through about, if I want to get there, what do I need to do? And there's not a consistent piece of advice that helps with that. The only thing that's consistent for me is you have to build an authentic style of leadership. There's no point trying to lead like Doug Silverstone because you're not Doug Silverstone. Leaders come in every different shape. You've got to lead like you. So early on in your career, there's a temptation to change the way you deliver because someone else is doing something really good, and so you copy their skill set. If you do that too much, by the time you lead, you haven't got them there anymore to copy, so you kind of end up with nothing. Whereas if you say that's really great and you take from them what you need, but you don't change integrally what's you, that works a lot better. So that for me, authenticity is what's needed, is one step, and that comes with integrity because people trust you, and then if people trust you, they work. And it can be hard to keep that because you'll always get people who disagree with you, but hold firm and it pays back dividends. And then I'd say, like, find friends, find not necessarily mentors, but there are lots of networking groups. There's like Women in IT for that. There are Black on Board. There's loads of groups like that that you can use to network, but it doesn't have to be within your own community. It's the point. There are people that you can find who will champion you, who will see the good in you and keep them close, and they will bring you forward, and they will give you opportunities and then take those opportunities. So find a team around you, and then the temptation as you go is to have people that feel like you. And what you actually want to do is have people that complement your skill set. So understanding yourself. So that, you know, like I have a monkey mind, I'm all over the place, I have lots of different ideas every day. So some of the people I need around me is to add that structure in, is to keep me focused and to keep that structure on. So look for people that have those skill sets. And some of the people I've worked best with, I would never be friends with, but I work really well with them. So so how would I put those into 3 tips? I think you get the picture. So I think integrity, I think choosing who you work with wisely, and don't be afraid to look for mentors.
Good points, great points, and hopefully, you know, people will take that on. I think, you know, for me as well, I think courage and that ability to put themselves out there and be uncomfortable, and to the points that you've made, you know, to sort of stretch themselves and find those allies, find those individuals that do sort of complement them. As you say, it can be easy to look for people that are the same as you, isn't it? And especially when it's underrepresented talent, it can be difficult to find those readily. really. But I think, as you say, if you're brave enough to put yourself out there, I think there are enough people that will raise you up. It's just finding those individuals, and not everyone is going to be that. And I think it's being comfortable enough to go, okay, that person's not right for me. That doesn't mean everybody's not right. So you just have to have that courage and curiousness to keep trying.
And tell your manager that you have those ambitions.
Yes, definitely.
And tell your leaders you have those. Don't just stop at your manager. Make sure, like early on in my career, I always found ways to talk to senior leaders, head of directors, CIOs, CEOs, and to make sure they were aware of me. And it wasn't being arrogant or bullshit. It was just having conversation. I've been lucky enough to find myself with some really good leaders. And the ones that are the best are open to people that are ambitious and talking, so they don't mind you talking to them. And if you're in an organization when none of the leaders are available, I'd say it's time to move on to another organization.
I cite that, as I said just briefly, not everyone is your tribe, but don't let that stop you and mean that, there's no jobs in, for example, social housing, or there's no jobs in technology. It doesn't mean you've got to completely throw away your entire career or thinking. It's just you've got to find a different person or persons that will support you. So that's a great point there. And so on the other foot, if I'm an employer and I want to attract and retain more diverse talent, specifically into STEM roles, I mean, what advice would you give for me or for them?
I would say you've got to be flexible. So you've got to make it a culturally great place to work. It's the best thing to do would to have a reflection already that shows there's lots of women that work in the organization. There's lots of ethnic minorities, there's lots of gay people, there's lots of whatever it is you're trying to do. The reality is that's not true for the vast majority of technology. So you can't do that. So what you've got to do is show that you are open and that you're willing to listen and change the way that you work to new people. And if you've got that culture that is open, that when someone comes in and says, I've just had a baby and I'm returning to work, so I would like to only come back 4 days a week. If the advert says it's a full-time job and it has to be a full-time job, you put people off. If you're in an interview and someone asks that and you say, oh, I've never thought of that before, you put people off. If someone asks, look, I've just come back from maternity leave, I'm looking for a job, it's not quite what I've done, but I've got these skills, can I do it 3 days a week? And you say, potentially, let's have a talk about how that would work, and we'll look at it. What hours would it be you work? Suddenly you're in a conversation that's how you're bringing them in. So it's whatever. And the same goes for any bit. If people are talking about any other challenges they've got, working with them to solve it shows that you're an organization that cares and can value that. And then suddenly you do have that organization that's reflective.
Yeah. Again, some great points. And I think it's just about, as you say, being open and flexible. There's so many businesses, certainly I think with technical skills, that they can struggle to hire those skills, but they're very reluctant to try and think differently. And I heard a story not all that long ago about it was a woman, and she was, I think it was a CEO role. They wanted her to do the role of a CEO, and she was on a 4-day week, and the board were appalled and like, there's no way we can consider you for a CEO position, on a 4-day week. This is a 5-day role. And she's like, okay, fine. How about if I do a trial, 4 days a week? If it doesn't work, I'll work you 5 days a week, or you can appoint somebody else. And sort of 6 months into the role, the chair came up to her and said, oh, can I ask, when's this trial going to start? And she'd been on the 4-day week, and I think that's exactly, that's the point, isn't it? And I think, just let's give people a chance, an opportunity, and if it doesn't work, let's have a grown-up conversation, but let's not go in expecting the worst. Let's see if we can achieve it, if there's a good enough reason and everybody knows going into it, and I think we could get to far many better places, and success stories for sure.
And I mean that does take leadership, because there's hundreds of years of the ways of work and inertia, and effectively every time you're trying to do something flexibly, you're knocking on the doors of that inertia. So you have to have leaders that are willing to go that extra mile, and those are the best organizations.
It comes back to that courage, doesn't it, and authenticity, really. Okay, brilliant. Thank you. Is there anything else that you wanted to sort of talk about today then?
I don't think so. It's been really fun and really enjoyable, to be honest. So yeah, nice to speak to you.
Yeah, and you also, and I'll obviously pop all the links to obviously the trustee work that you're doing, as well as your sort of LinkedIn profile and what have you. So anybody that's interested in any of those elements can seek you out and look at what you're talking about and what the organisations you support do as well, Doug. But yeah, I really appreciate it. It's been a very insightful discussion, and hopefully it will appeal to a few more businesses as well as individuals, and help them sort of come into this community and these types of roles. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.